Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. Learn from their experiences and navigate the highs and lows of the investing world. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here today on this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. I'm really interested to talk with our next guest, Amanda Webster. She is the Chief Operating Officer of a really cool company called Fund&Grow. I've been aware of Fund&Grow for years now, and people are talking about it. There's lots of influencers that talk about Fund&Grow, and it's a really innovative way for business owners to get access to additional capital to fund their business operations and anything that they're doing within their business. And so I had an opportunity to meet Amanda recently, and we had a great talk, and I really wanted to learn more about their business model and also learn about Amanda and her background and how she came to Fund&Grow. And so now she's here with us today to talk about everything that she's working on at Fund&Grow and what is working for her in her personal life and in business in general. So Amanda, thank you so much for taking the time and being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So you're based out of Florida.
Yes.
And born and raised there. Amazing state. I love Florida. My favorite thing about Florida is Publix, and it's
The subs.
amazing sub shop. Yeah, I have some friends that I met at the family mastermind where every time now, when everybody's going out to Burns and spending, $200 on a piece of steak and an old fashioned, we go to Publix, and we've made it a tradition now. I think we've gone like 3 times now in a row. Yeah,
They're
that's
amazing.
why I love Florida.
They're amazing. I'm a huge boating person. I'm on the water a lot. I live in Florida. I get that luxury. And I will tell you that every boat day includes a Publix sub. It's like a staple. Whenever I travel and I'm not in a southern state and there's no Publix, I don't really know what to do. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, you just feel naked, right? Like, where's Publix? And it's a really, really weird experience. If anyone hasn't been there, you have to go try it out. Everybody thinks like, why would you go to a sub place in a shopping market, right? It doesn't make any sense, but it's great.
They need to make
So,
their own subways. Like they need to make public sub shops and do nationwide, just a sub shop like Subway is.
yeah.
They should do that. They would make a killing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's become so popular. So you've been with the company now for almost 5 years. And I'm sure the company's changed a lot since you got there, but tell me what you guys do, just for everybody out there who isn't aware, and who are you helping, what problems are you solving? Give us the lowdown.
So we are a business funding company, but we have a unique approach that a lot of people don't know you can use to the capacity that you can. We help entrepreneurs at any phase. So it can be a brand new business idea that you are ready to launch. It can be a seasoned business, and it's a supplemental way of having additional access. And it's industry agnostic, which is what makes it beautiful. You can use it for any type of industry. You can use it for any expenses. These are revolving type of lines of credit that we're getting. And the biggest pain point that I've noticed with entrepreneurs, especially in a real estate industry, is the limited funding options they have without losing equity or a huge cost to the capital. So when Ari opened the company, that was one of the reasons he did it, was he was really intricate in the real estate world for investing. And he found that in 2007, 2008, things went really crazy and everyone had to kind of pivot things. And he found this industry. And it's a way to be able to give funding in very creative space. And it also doesn't have all the red tape that you get from everywhere else. So, to get a regular traditional business term loan, you have to have, 2 years in business, and you have to have these gross receipts and all these bank statements and tax returns, whereas the type of funding we're getting doesn't have any of that. And also, it's the time, right? So everything we do here, it's a white glove service, and the owner, the founder, the CEO, whoever's coming into us for funding, they don't have the time to spend building these lines. It's not just like an application and done process. So we take all of that on our shoulders, and we've built a model that can be able to make it where all you do is sign up and we're handling everything else. You don't have to worry about it. The lines are just going to show up and you're going to be able to start using them. But like I said, it's mostly the niche market we've hit is real estate because of the lack, because real estate's considered so risky to everybody else. And I get it. It's a volatile market. It goes all over the place, but it's also such a huge market that people shouldn't be afraid of, right? And that's the one thing that most people are afraid to quit their job and go to their side hustle, or afraid to move forward because they don't have the right funding in place. And they don't know what access is out there. They just think, oh, I can't get a business loan. And an SBA loan is such a monster to even look at. So it's just a different area, but like I said, it can be both from the ground floor to being a supplement for an established entrepreneur.
Right. Yeah, because traditionally you think about kind of two kinds of loans in business, right? So you have like this business loan, you go to your bank, you get a loan, and you're right, they're going to ask for a bunch of documentation, they're going to have requirements and red tape. And then you think about the other side of real estate businesses, it's like hard money, right?
Yep.
Asset-based lending, where they're lending based off of the property itself. But in the middle, there's all of these operational costs. There's things you got to buy to go and do deals. You have to spend money on marketing and employees, and you have other expenses that you have to pay to run the business that doesn't really fit into either of those categories. And this would be a perfect fit for that.
Yeah, and even your fix and flip, investors who they can get the capital to purchase that flip because it's a temporary, housing that they have to, get the lending for, but they don't have the money to pay for the rehabs. They don't have, and how many times do you go over budget on any type of real estate project? I've never seen someone actually stay in their budget. And then where do you use? But also the marketing, attending different masterminds, events, if you need educational things, licensing, all of those things are valid business expenses that you can use business credit for. It can be for anything that's a valid business expense. I always joke and say, don't get it and go buy a boat, because that's not going to really work for you, because that's not a valid business expense. And you should be only using it for things that are going to return, have an ROI on you.
Right.
But yeah, how do you get that first property? How do you even get to the point of having the asset? A lot of times it's easier to temporarily use other funds to close on that deal before getting the actual mortgage. If you're a real estate, investor that
Right.
holds properties, things like that. So we see it being used in every scenario you can think of.
Sure. So you see lines. So lines makes me think lines of credit, and it is credit based. So is this a mixture of like credit cards and credit lines, like from a bank, or how is it structured?
So they're all going to be major lenders. We're not talking alternative lenders. We're talking, your Chase, your Bank of America, your local credit union. We build them. We have thousands of different offers from lenders, but they're all lenders that are within the normal FDIC, type of market. But these are business lines of credit. They're revolving, but they're housed on a credit card, but it is a business credit card. So it's on the business EIN side. And I know people sometimes hear that and they don't understand how that translates. So, it's no different when you're thinking of the personal credit card. Personal credit cards are lines of credit. They're just the vehicle that's used is the credit card that you swipe. However, in business, there are ways and there are mechanisms to be able to use that credit card in any way you can imagine, with probably one exception. You cannot buy crypto with it. That's like the only thing I've ever seen be an issue. Otherwise, you can use your business credit cards to buy anything for your business that you can think of. It just might involve an extra step, but it's absolutely doable. And the cost of it is going to be far less than your like hard money alternatives.
So when you talk about cost, I think about points, right? There's going to be points on loans. That's the upfront origination so that the lender can make some cash. But there's also interest rates. So people always talk about credit cards having high interest rates. Like, is that still something to consider when you're using this structure?
So there's no points on the front side, so you don't have to worry about that. We have a service fee if you come to Fund&Grow, but you don't necessarily have to come to Fund&Grow. That's not what I'm saying, but there's a service fee for us. But for the actual lenders, yes, these are very similar to your traditional credit card style accounts. However, we only recommend and target offers that have a 0% term for 12, 24 months, depending on, the offer. The goal would not be to use this type of funding to hold long term. So the goal would not be to, like you would a mortgage or a business term loan, because those are like fixed payments every month that you pay towards that loan. The goal for this should be that you're able to create the ROI fast enough to never worry about interest once it kicks in. So you're going to have that buffer of 12 to 24 months to be able to have no interest. You do have minimum payments every month, but just like anything else in the credit space, it's going to be 1% of what you owe. So you may have $200,000 in credit limits, but you only owe $50,000, right? So you're only going to pay on what you owe, and it's 1% is the minimum. I'm not suggesting you only pay minimum, but that is like your worst case scenario. The goal would be to build that's why you only use this for ROI type of things. You're only using it for marketing that's going to then turn into, revenue. You use it for us for paid ads that then turns into revenue. So the goal would be that you would treat these accounts to only temporarily hold that debt while you're creating that ROI. So that's why in a lot of cases for seasoned people, it's a supplement. It's not their primary, or they've already gotten to the point where they have commercial mortgages set up for their investment properties, and this is just their supplement to rehab it, or if they're going to be flipping it, just to get all that out there, stage it, the marketing for that, or even paying, a real estate agent to be able to assist with, finding renters if you're a holding property type thing.
Right.
But you want to have a plan. Always want to have a plan to pay it back. You have to pay the money back. It's not a grant. So you want to make sure that you're building a smart plan, and that we educate our clients on that while they're in our program, of making sure that you are smart with how you're using the credit. But like anything else, it should be being used for things that are going to increase your revenue.
Right. So that's a balancing act for most business owners, because was it something like 94% of businesses fail within the first couple years? Right. So
Sure.
everybody's got the best intention that they're going to get a good ROI on that spend, but most aren't, right? So how do they prepare for that worst case scenario? Is it rolling that debt into another card when it comes due, and that could be a way of buying some more time?
We see that happen, and we have people who come back to us for that purpose. Like, it didn't work out how it was supposed to. I need to find some more offers. People do that in the personal space all the time, where they're rolling those offers around so that they can have longer periods of time to pay off the debt. Typically, we see people who they use it for that temporary, and maybe they're able to get that long-term loan put in place and be able to pay it off. But again, yes, a lot of businesses fail, and most of them fail within the very first, 2 years, I think is the main number that most people look at, within 2 years, and sometimes less. But a lot of times it's because they didn't have the capital to do the things to grow the business.
Yeah, that's
So
true.
it is a balancing, because you need money to grow it, but then you also need to make sure that you're capturing money to pay back the debt that you're leveraging.
Yeah.
But debt leveraging is something that it's been going on for years. We use it in every aspect of our lives. We're just not realizing that's how we're using it.
Yeah.
On the business credit side, the good news is, if you have to temporarily hold it, it's not on your personal credit. It's not dragging it down. A lot of business owners in the beginning put everything on their personal credit, and now they're actually having to not only roll and figure out how to pay that, it's sitting on their personal credit and it's dragging their scores down. So this can alleviate that. At the same time, you need to be aware of it. You need to have a plan. You need to have a plan B if you can't, if something doesn't go through the way you wanted it to. So, I think with being an entrepreneur, one of the things that they fail at across the board is proper planning. The business plan, who's going to do what employees are they going to hire, how they're going to fund it. It's kind of planning across the board. And this needs to be one of those pieces, whether you're using business credit, a business term loan, an SBA loan, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're using, you need to have a plan in order to pay those debts back.
Yeah. So when I think of business credit, the first thing that comes to mind is like the Dun and Bradstreet number, right? And there's a whole process to going and getting business credit. So for brand new companies that are just starting off, how are you able to get a business credit card when they have no credit? There's no money going through the accounts yet. Is it just what's the process there? I'm confused about how they can get credit without any credit offering without any credit on the business yet.
Yeah, so that's where the personal guarantee component will come in on the front side. It's not going to report on your personal, but your big lenders like Chase and Bank of America, Citi, all the ones that offer business credit cards, they're going to look at your personal credit to get you approval when you don't have any of that established.
Mm,
Eventually, once you establish business credit and you get vendor trade lines through that whole Dun and Bradstreet, you're building your paydex score, doing all these things. There's kind of like a plan going in tandem, which is what we teach and what we do, so that you can build it to eventually not need the PG component of things and get to that non-recourse side. Now, the vendor side is like the trade lines, the net 30, 60, 90-day accounts with direct vendors. Like Amazon has that for, their drop ship or their e-com drop shipping people. Those are non-PG. Those only go on the EIN, but you're only going to get very minimal amounts while you're building. So you might only get a couple $100s at first, which sounds crazy, but that's kind of how those work.
yeah.
The major banks, they're going to leverage your personal in order to get you in the door until you build enough to not need that anymore. Now, again, it's not going to show up on your personal. It's not going to hurt your personal, but they are going to look at that to make you lendable to them. So that's kind of how you get around it in the early phase. Once you get to a point that you can get commercial style lending, non-recourse, only on the EIN, no PG, then you can get rid of that side. But that's something that takes years to build, and obviously takes gross receipt, provable revenue, things like that on the business side that most people don't have the first several years.
Yeah, and if you're running all your revenue through your bank, like they see that
Yep.
coming in every month, right? So they don't have to go ask for a bunch of documentation on what your revenue is because they see it, right? They got the gross receipts. They also see your expenses likely. So, they're tapped into it. Is that why I get so many credit card offerings? Is because they see my
Yep.
account. They're like, let's see if we can give them more money to spend.
Yeah, no, it's true. What this building I'm sitting in is the second building that Fund&Grow has been in. When Ari purchased this, he purchased it through the bank that we bank with, non-recourse commercial lending, only on the EIN side so that it wasn't attached to anything. But that took years. He purchased the first one too, but that was, again, think about 5 years in to Fund&Grow's journey, did he purchase that first building. And then this one was purchased, I think, in 2019. So, you can get there, but yes, your actual bank that sees all your stuff, they're going to be begging you like, come on, come over here. Let me lend you money once you have that established. And we look at that for the established people. Who do they bank with is going to be our number one place we're going to look at first, because
Right.
that relationship has so much more leverage than anything else.
Oh yeah. So what are these vendor lines of credit? Like for a real estate company or for a flipper, like what are those lines of credit? Is it like Home Depot? You mentioned Amazon.
Yep.
Is
Home
it
Depot
those
has them.
kinds that are, and is that process completely different than what you would do through Fund and Grow?
So we offer both for the same price. So we're doing both at the same time,
Hmm.
in that we have a portal that gives you access of how to get set up with Dun& Bradstreet, which is free. You don't need to pay anything to get your business set up with Dun & Bradstreet. And then how to start building those trade lines that are non-recourse direct vendor lines. So yeah, you can get your office supplies from Staples, Uline. They have, vendor side. You can get your materials from Home Depot. They have vendor sides, and depending on where you're at is how much you'll get. And then also when you use the vendor corporate credit, which is all part of business credit, it's all the same thing. It's just two different avenues. That side, you want to use super aggressive. You want to be using that as much as you can use it, because the more you're using it, the more they're going to give you. They're going to increase
Mhm.
that because they like to see that healthy activity. The only difference is you cannot wait to pay it off. You're going to have some type of net agreement, whether it's 30, 60, or 90 days. You must pay it off in that time frame. So unlike the major bank cards that we're talking about on the business credit side that we're establishing, those you have technically forever, right? You just have, you don't want to do it that way, but technically, as long as you're paying your minimum payments, they're not going to necessarily care. Your vendor trade lines that are direct, those have to be paid off in whatever term that they're giving you. So be very careful, because business credit, just like personal credit, it's all reported, right? It's all getting reported. Dun & Bradstreet has a Paydex score and it's doing that stuff. I think it's Experian has a business credit report side, and there's LexisNexis has it. And if you start getting negative on the business credit side, that's so much harder to undo than if you have a blemish on your personal credit. So you have to be really careful in doing that on the EIN, business credit report side, because that side, it's not as forgiving. Once you mess up a line, it could have ripple effects for years. So again, really smart, have your plan, don't take off more, don't bite off more than you can chew type of situation. But those are a little different. That's kind of like why there's that difference is, those have a term, you have to pay them off. And they're only used at the direct vendor, whereas the major business credit cards are going to be able to be used anywhere. And you have a little bit more flexibility with the payment side, because you can only pay the minimum payment, and you can do that for months until you pay it off.
I see there being a potential challenge for businesses to find viable direct to vendor arrangements, because like for me, the thing I spend the most money on is travel. Right? I mean, is there a direct to vendor agreement that I can do with Delta or with a hotel? Like how would I do that?
No, I typically recommend the business credit card side for that one, and specifically ones that are with those. So there's obviously American Airlines, Delta, they all have their own type of cards that you can get, but also don't discount the fact that Chase's business cards might have better points than the direct ones because they transfer at a higher rate. And there's a whole point game that goes into it. There's people that live in that space of like, how do you, play the point game, both in the personal and business credit card side. So for travel, we use it for travel. I use it for travel when I'm going to any events or doing any masterminds or whatever. I'm paying on the business credit cards that Fund&Grow has. And those are easy because you can just swipe your card, right? You can just swipe the card or put it in the, in the online, sign up, whatever, book your flight. So those are super easy with the business credit cards because there's nothing you have to do special. And you just put in your American Airlines Advantage number or whatever, your Delta Skyline, number, and you're able to earn the points on both. You earn the points for booking the ticket with them, and then you're earning points on your Chase card, which then transfers over and you can, cash them out in that side. So there's a whole world that goes there. The vendor direct doesn't really have that same flexibility in that because you only have what's available. You can get like online marketing companies that do use the vendor side within that D&B world. And so you can find a lot of different offers. You can get, swag printed if you're doing like vendor booths at events. You can get those through vendor, direct lines. There's a whole world. There's hundreds and hundreds of offers that make sense. And you can do all of them at the same time. It's not hurting you to get all of those accounts open and start using them. Whereas on the business credit card side, you only want to do so much. You don't want to open 15 cards. It's not at all a good idea. Don't do that.
That's where the white glove work that your team does is so important, because they know the strategy, they know what works and what doesn't work, and how to like scale it up, right? You start off small and then you get to larger card and larger card. And so must be a pretty important like discovery session that's done up front.
Yes.
Where you talk to the client to figure out what their ultimate goals are. And then you guys structure a plan around, what you already know about the business and what that the business owner wants to accomplish, and then put together that plan.
Yeah. Everybody gets a specific strategy session that's based on their personal profile, their business profile, and ultimately there's a whole array of questions we ask. And obviously things like, where do you bank? Who do you have credit cards with on your personal side? We're looking at all the different relationships and seeing, and then what is your goal? What's most important to you? And we'll never apply without the client knowing exactly what we're applying for, what that card means, what that interest rate will be when it kicks in. We know that
Mm-hmm.
on the front side. So, and the one thing I will say about the credit card industry in general is it's probably the least volatile with interest rates. They tend to stay pretty consistent, plus or minus a couple of percentage points. Whereas the regular interest rate, the regular lending, I mean, in the mortgage industry, it fluctuates so much during different times that, it can be huge, that cost of capital. Whereas credit cards are pretty much set in stone for the most part, and you know what you're getting when you sign up. You know exactly what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
You know exactly where it's going to be. They
Right.
can be higher. I said that earlier. I'm not going to deny that credit card interest rates can definitely be on the higher end than what you're comfortable with. However, I don't know if you've been out there lately to see what the interest rates are everywhere. So they're not that much higher these days than they used to be, but they'll also be consistent. And that's why building that plan and having the time to be able to pay it off, build the ROI, and and also let's say business A fails and business B is a success. You can always figure out how to lend from one to the other, and there's all kinds of
Mm.
tax write-offs and things that can happen with that, to make sure that plan works out. So if there's anything I know about entrepreneurs is they never have their hands only in one pot. There's always multiple things
Oh
going
yeah.
on.
So speaking of, the transferring of funds, so there's loans involved potentially. Um, is that part of the strategy that you guys teach is in how to like move money around to accomplish these different goals within their own entities?
So you can transfer business to business, right? The only
Mhm.
restrictions with business credit is you can't pay yourself or your business. So you have to be able to pay another business. So we definitely talk about lending money between businesses. That's something that's very normal. That happens all of the time in any type of lending, in any type of business. There's a step that people have to take to what I call pull money off the card. So basically, in order to pull money off the card for any purpose, to wire it to a closing agent, to be the down payment on a house, I've had people purchase investment homes on business credit, and because it was easier to purchase on business credit, wire transferred over, and then get a long-term mortgage later, or they were flipping it quick enough that it didn't matter. So there's a whole process, but it's not what people think. It is 100% legitimate. It is a merchant processor that's doing it. It is normal big names that people use, and you pay them a small fee. And I look
Mm.
at it almost like points in that regard, because it's 2.9% is what you're going to pay of whatever you're transferring from one to the other. So you set up accounts with these people, and then you have to give documentation, whether it be an invoice, a closing something that's showing why you're transferring money from your business card to this other endpoint. So people use that all the time to transfer from one business to another. That's very normal, because there are businesses that are too risky. There's just businesses that can't get lending for reasons. Their codes are wrong. Their title of their business matters. What you name your business can actually impact your funding. And I don't
Right.
think anyone thinks about that, right? I opened a business because consulting is looked at medium risk, but planning is so totally safe. They mean the
Mm.
same thing. So it's like, all right, so Webster planning is more lendable than Webster consulting. Don't know why. It's just the industry. I have no
Yeah.
understanding of why. But because I know that, I did that research to figure out, like, what should I name this company? What's going to be the most lendable, safe entity? Obviously, there's safer names than that. I mean, if you use acronyms, people love those because they don't know what the heck you're doing.
Yeah. Well,
But
plus
if
you can
you,
have like the official business name would be an acronym, but then you have a DBA
oh yeah,
so that people out in the real world know what you're doing. But internally, it's just some bunch of letters, right? And
yeah.
so that's probably the
Just don't
most
use the
lendable.
DBA for funding or for anything like that. You only use the DBA for marketing and for outward facing.
Right. So that does bring up some interesting names, right? So we're in the investing world, right? I can imagine there's words like investments or homes or housing. Like those are probably ones that are really low on the lendable scale.
Yep. But
Any
construction,
others?
construction's actually okay,
Oh, it is.
right?
Okay.
It is. I had somebody who was had cartel. it was not that type of cartel, but that was what was on their name. And I'm like, yeah, we can't do that. You can't use that for funding. Banks aren't going to touch you. And it was a funny name and it made sense. And the marketing was genius. And I loved all of it. But I'm like, yeah, you can't use it for funding. You just can't. You've got to create a different entity for funding. And we do that too. When we do the consult, the one-on-one, we're looking at all that. We're looking at what is that business structure? How is it looking on the state site? How is it registered? What's, all these things. What are the codes they use when they set it up? And if it's not going to be the best results, our recommendation to them is going to be open an LLC specifically for funding. Let's talk about that. Let me help you get that going. Let's get a fresh EIN that's different. And then that's when you can lend back and forth for that, because there's just some people who have 10 years invested in this business and they have all this marketing and they don't want to change it. So again, that's when you have to make those decisions. But there's just some names that banks are like, yeah, that's not happening.
What are some others that are just like out there that they're completely unlendable, or you're going to have a challenge?
The adult industry, if it's obvious. We have one locally that's called like Todd's Superstore or something like that. And it's actually an adult store, but because it doesn't tell you what it is, it sounds like something else. So there's ways around it. But then we've had others that are not so, they're direct or they're puns and you can know what they are. So, there's certain things. The cannabis industry is one of those ones where it's tricky. So you have to be really careful with the naming and how it is. But a lot of cannabis entrepreneurs have a real estate holding company or something because the property is owned by somebody different that they're using to do all the grow and all that. And it's completely legitimate. It's just that it's not federally recognized, so that the lenders won't lend to it if they know that's what you're doing. So all of your storefronts that are selling, or not, whatever, you're picking up your prescription, those aren't lendable in the direct sense a lot of times because it's not federally recognized yet.
Got it.
Weird area.
Yeah, but that's like an obvious, you just build another LLC, right? And then you fund it that way. And that's a company that does marketing, or they do, something else, right?
Yeah. They also don't like nonprofits. The word trust in a business name tends to be a weird one because they're thinking it's like probate style planning versus a business, even though there are some cases when the word trust is okay. So it's looking at all these different pieces. And then what industry did you code it to when you set it up? When you set it up, what did you tell the state it was? What did you tell the IRS it was? Like, we look at all that because, if you can get into a safer industry or be a little bit more broad, it's helpful. It just makes your life easier long-term in business, not just for what we do, but when you get to those bigger loans. Even getting a commercial real estate loan sometimes can be easier with, your big banks if you have that all set up correctly.
So that brings up the next likely question, or reasonable question, which is the coding, right? So what are like some of the more lendable codes that people that might be thinking, well, I'm in real estate, but there really isn't like a real estate category per se, but maybe like I also do some education and so what's like a good strategy there, just to kind of in general, without getting too specific for everyone's unique situation?
Yeah, like the coaching educational would definitely be the road I would lean towards. Although I said consulting was middle of the road, it's still fine. It's just planning was better. Because that can be like architectural firms sometimes they put planning in their name, or design. Design is a good, like, that category, because you could be designing homes, but they don't specify it all the way. You don't have to go all the way down to that granular level. So I think there's a whole list. There's, as you know, there's a bunch of codes out there. There's really only a few that we say, no, we're not touching that. And that's those really specific industries. But I think it's just being broad, be vague and broad as much as you can, because then you can tell this whatever story you need to make sure it's in line with what you're doing. Because you also don't, a lot of people don't understand, I guess, the value of creating the layered approach where you have like the main arm of the company is named XYZ. And then you have all your other stuff trickled down. And there's obviously some legal protections for that reason. But if you keep everything in that one name, that's the safest name, it also helps it build quicker. A lot of people think, oh, I want to get multiple businesses set up. On the Dun & Bradstreet side, that's true. You should absolutely set up your Dun & Bradstreet profile and build your Paydex score for every business that you create an LLC or a corp for. But when it comes to business credit, it might make more sense to limit how many businesses you're applying for, because then it takes time and you have to keep building that credit. So if you start spreading it out over multiple businesses, it actually just takes longer to build up to lines that actually have enough value. To build up to, $200,000, $300,000 in a business takes a little bit of time. So I always recommend, build one main one first, whatever one's going to be the most lendable. And then the rest of them can, you can shift money around or just do those secondary and worry about it later.
Right. Yeah, and there's a lot of moving parts. So I can see how that white glove service would be extremely helpful for the average person who probably isn't even doing their business full time. Like that's just like their side hustle. And they got their 9 to 5 and they're still trying to learn the business. I think a lot of people who listen to this show is they're in the real estate game, right? So they're still learning how to do fix and flip or how to do wholesale, and they've bought education and they're trying to do all of that and they're drinking from a fire hose. And then this thing comes, they're like, yeah, that seems like something I should do. And then they just wouldn't know where to start.
Yeah. So we built that. That's why we built what we did. A lot of people in our space will coach you on how to do it, which again, as an entrepreneur, you're already having to learn enough. You're already having to do enough. And typically you have one lane that's your passion. That's what you really want to be doing. So, there's always, if you're not making an impact or income, those are those two ones everyone, like, if it's not making an impact or income, you shouldn't be doing as an entrepreneur. Everything else should be done by somebody else or something
Right.
else or some other service. And I know that's not reality right away with the side hustle side because you don't have all this money to do it. But if you look and pay attention to the ones that matter, there's a lot of services out there that really do help you build your ROI quicker and let you quit that 9 to 5, right? And get all in on your side hustle, or, get a couple properties under your belt so that you can start building your portfolio, or, or flipping, whatever you're doing on that side. So I think it's one of those things that you need to make sure you're buying back your time, which is that dream, buying back all your time, but doing it smart. So I don't ever recommend just going all in and not being educated also. So I always recommend learn about it, have the free consult, do the stuff on the front side and learn exactly what you're getting into. Ask all the questions that are specific to your business of what you're doing before you ever pay anyone $1. If somebody's not offering you either a very minimal consult on something like this, on a service that's building such a big thing that has a lot of moving parts, I would be leery. I just would be, because they should be able to show you what it is that they're doing and how they're going to do it and what you can expect before you pay them money. Because,
Right.
what we charge is, $3,500. That's not necessarily easy sometimes to swallow if you're not understanding what that means and what value you're getting from that.
Yeah. And it seems like a reasonable price too. If you're starting to open up all these lines and they're getting the business consulting on the back end, because it sounds like some of the consulting and advice you give is not necessarily just about these credit cards. It's about how to run a business in general. Like you're helping with all these other things that they'd have to figure out on their own. That isn't necessarily like, okay, here's what cards to use.
Yeah. Yeah. We coach them on not only we figure out what cards, right, they're going to go for, what we're going to open up and what we're going to do, but then we're also coaching them on a couple of things. Yeah. How you use that properly. How do you set up that plan? How do you be smart with that? We do have, we call it premium coaching, but it's specific to like Fund and Grow model. And it's going all in on, okay, now you have funding. What do you do? What's the next step? What are your directions? And we try to build out as much material and coaching that we can. I do a live every month with the team to be able to answer questions and say, like, what are your pain points? We're getting you funds, but what do you need? Because everybody needs money, but what do you need it for? What do you need help with? How can we, facilitate to make sure that you're being successful? So that's kind of where, like, I think the grow part of the name, that's kind of what I envision on that. Like, we're funding on the front side, but now you need to grow. How do we get you there?
Right.
And sometimes it's connecting them with different people, right? It's connecting them with people that we've worked with or services that make sense for them and what they're doing. And other times it's things they can do on their own. A lot of it can be operational based of, whether they should hire employees, should they just contract with people? How do you know the difference? How do you know when you're ready to bring a W-2 in versus a 1099? There's a lot of weird questions that come up after, once they get going. So we want to be that resource as much as we can, and then continue to have them in our family, because we're not here. It's not a membership that you just keep reoccurring. It's not, it's a 12-month program that we're doing to build these lines. But then we open up the coaching ongoing for a nominal fee to be able to keep having access to us and the corporate credit vendor side to keep growing that side, because we don't want to just toss them and be done. That's not our model. We
Right.
want them to become our biggest advocates, to send their friends and family. So we want to make sure we're doing it right.
That's awesome. Yeah, you really opened my eyes up to this whole business model, right? Like I said, I've heard about you guys for years, and there's just so many moving parts, and I can see how someone could really get lost with this. So for anybody who's listening, who's interested in, talking with you or somebody on your team, where can they go and find you guys?
So I created a link for everybody today, and it's just Fund&Grow. It's all spelled out. fundandgrow.com/REI Hacker. That way you can get there. It'll give you access to be able to run a free pre-qual and have that free consultation on the front side, see where you're at, see what you can do. And there's a couple extra bonuses if you do end up moving forward. We have a $500 discount in there. There are payment plans available if you decide you want to move forward. We try to make this as easy as possible. Our service fee is 100% tax deductible on your business taxes as well, because it's a valid, I give the IRS code and everything. And then we also have a BOGO. So anybody who ends up signing up, you can bring in your business partner, your spouse, significant other, I have mom and, child type, partners that come in. It's completely separate. They get their own membership. They get to build their own business lines, but we offer a BOGO for coming through the podcast. So and there's no time. This is a decision that you should take with a lot of understanding. So it's not something that it's expiring. It will be there. It's good to go. Even if it's 2 months from now, it's fine. It's all in there and built in, because we want to make sure we're providing the best experience for everybody.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Amanda, for taking the time to share, the background in the company and what you guys do. And I can certainly, I see and I understand how this could be extremely valuable for any business owner, somebody who's just starting off, but also established people who are looking to fund some additional things and grow their business. So thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. It was so much fun.
Yes. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening to this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. Please keep an eye out for future episodes where we talk into industry experts and service providers and operators that are doing really cool things in the business. You can find this on many of the channels that you get your podcast from, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube as well, for those that like to watch it, not just listen to it. But thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.
Bye.
That's a wrap on today's Real Estate Revelations. Thank you for tuning into the REI Hacker Podcast. Remember, every property has a story, and every deal is a lesson. Until next time, keep hacking the real estate world.